Today's lecture is in connection with Black History Month. It is about a black man named Rubin Stacy, who was arrested in Davie in 1935 when a white woman accused him of accosting her at gunpoint. When he was only asking for a cup of water. Right now I'd like to introduce our Vice President, Richard Quadracci, who will tell you more about this incident and introduce our special guests who will present the story of Mr. Stacy. Questions will follow.
Thank you, Karen. Karen's been producing these lectures for 8 years, and they've been wildly successful. Today, as Vice President of the Hollywood Historical Society, I have the rare privilege of introducing today's speakers. Rubin Stacy was lynched not far from here in 1935. Broward officials formally memorialized the lynching with the renaming of a portion of Davie Boulevard to Rubin Stacy Memorial Boulevard on the corner of Southwest 28th Terrace near the incident that occurred. Tenille Brown, as well as being a descendant of the Rubin Stacy family, also has her own production company, Virtually There, and is thriving to provide new innovations in the teaching of African American Black history. Along with her is her great aunt, Naves, who recently turned 96 and was living with Rubin Stacy and his wife, along with her mother, 6 other family members at the time of the Rubin Stacy lynching. It was only last year, upon the renaming of Davie Avenue to Rubin Stacy Boulevard, that Anne, Tenille, and the rest of the Rubin family began to assemble the Stacy family story, not only of the events of the lynching and how it has affected the whole family in the 8 decades since the lynching. Anne has taught 8th grade social studies for 25 years in the Broward school system. Today is the first time Anne and Tenille are going to present the initial clips from the documentary the Stacy family is currently working on. So at this time, Tenille are presenting. Please give them a Hollywood warm welcome, Anne and Tenille.
Who's nervous? Not me. Hi, my name is Tenille Brown, and thank you for joining me today. Today we will view clips from the making of the lynching of Rubin Stacy. Here with me is my Aunt Anne. She is the narrator of the lynching of the Rubin Stacy documentary. Anne lived in the same house with Rubin's wife Willie Mae, and son Willie C. This picture is probably the most well-known photograph of a lynch in Florida. In fact, upon teaching my children our family history to include the lynching of Rubin, when I looked up the word lynch, his picture was listed in the Encyclopedia Britannica as an example of the word. Black men were not allowed to have any type of involvement with white women. However, during the Great Depression, regardless of race, it was difficult for individuals to find work. Many would go door to door and business to business asking for support for their families. Newspapers report that Rubin asked Marion Jones for a drink of water. Allegedly, when she let him in, he threatened her with a penknife. She told police that she screamed and that he ran away, and her 5-year-old son ran for help. Oh, sorry. 2 days later, he was found hiding. This means he spent 2 days hiding and in fear of losing his life. Can you imagine the things that had gone through his mind? Worried about his wife and son, and certainly in fear of losing his life. When asked why he ran from the arresting officer, it is said that Rubin replied, "Well, I just can't stand it. You know how Negroes are. They just can't stand for anyone to chase them." It is my belief that if Rubin asked for anything, he asked Marion Jones for work. He was identified as a black man terrorizing a white woman. According to news articles, Rubin was hunted down by a mob, lynched and shot 17 times as a crowd of men, women, and children watched. He denied threatening Marion Jones. With no evidence, the police turned him over to the Broward County's Sheriff Clark. Sheriff Clark did not place Rubin in a lineup to be identified. He took him to the home of Marion Jones to be identified, which was against the law. The sheriff offered $25 to each deputy who took part in arresting Rubin. It is said that he was being held in Broward County Jail when false rumors started to spread that he had raped Marion Jones. It is on record that Sheriff Clark decided to move Rubin to a jail in Miami due to the large crowds of white supremacists forming. The car that the sheriff was driving was supposedly ran off the side of the road. It is reported that the crowd removed Rubin from the car and took him to a wooded area near Marion Jones' home. They used wire from Marion Jones' clothesline to hang Rubin. They then proceeded to shoot him 17 times. If you look closely at the picture, you can see he is still wearing handcuffs. His body hung for over 8 hours until he was removed. We're about to take a look at trailer 1. My goal during this trailer was to show the emotions of Rubin while he was being chased. It also depicts the emotions of his son during his father's disappearance.
So many folks is looking for you. You don't have to bother me. The landlord's been complaining. The ice man. I think I can
The hanging shoes and clothesline are symbolic of Rubin's lynching. I made the decision to move away from showing the lynching during the film for personal reasons. Also, the only picture that is available of Rubin was the one that was used during the lynching. There are no other photographs of him. For that reason, we decided to film the gentleman portraying Rubin without showing his face. And this clip and describes the family relationship. My goal was to show the love and adoration within the family.
To tell you about my uncle, Rubin Stacy, is to talk about what an 8-year-old would experience and what an 8-year-old can remember to tell you. I distinctly remember my uncle as being a very tall person, a very handsome person. And I always saw him in overalls. That is what the work clothes looked like. And the evenings when we would have dinner together, the family would have dinner together. Sometimes he and his family would eat with the other family, rather the remainder of the family. And sometimes they would eat alone in their room. This was something that was done by choice, not by asking them to do this. He, along with my grandfather and my father, went out every day, as I said, searching for work. I imagine there were times when they were extremely tired, extremely hot. During the month of July, Florida is extremely hot. But that did not stop them. They continued to go out every day. This became a part of the custom of the African American family. The men were accustomed to taking care of their families. Their wives did not go out someplace to work. So they naturally had a feeling of letdown that they were not able to do this.
The man the world knows as Rubin Stacy, the man who was lynched by a mob of police. My family knows as a husband, a family man, and a father. He shared a loving relationship with his wife and son. He was hardworking. He was a provider and a protector. During the Depression, it was common for men to seek work to provide for their families. The men in our family were fishermen and farmhands. It was said that they fished daily. The men would work and women would upkeep the home. By tradition, the men in our family are providers. On the day Rubin was lynched, my uncle and my great uncle left home in search of work. They did not return. This changed the dynamic of our family. As a family, they would have dinner together, laugh together, and tell jokes together, and talk every evening. There was no laughter. The family went completely silent. And when asked about Rubin, the children were told not to speak about it. This is a trauma we have carried as a family for years. There was a sense of fear in our home, fearful that if we talk about it as a family, we might be lynched. Shame because of the whispers, the accusations, and the gossip, and the unsaid threats. Lynching was used as a threat to the Black community, a threat we have carried for years. During this clip, Ann invites viewers to reflect on what may have happened during the moments leading up to Rubin's arrest.
He was accused of aggravating or attacking a white woman after he is supposed to have asked her for water, or as some others say, asked if she had any work that he could do. Now I say to you, in the year 1935, which would seem more rational to you, that this Black man would knock on the back door of a white woman and ask her for a glass of water? Or do you think he might have knocked on the door and asked if she had any work that he could do? I say to you, which one seemed more rational to you in the year 1935? White woman giving her glass of water to a Black man, possibly touching his hand. Or she might have said, no, I have no work to do. I want you to have a picture in your mind of what I just said as you listen to the remainder of this. On that particular day, my uncle went out to work as usual. But at the end of the day, no one returned except my father and my grandfather. Well, naturally, my uncle's wife was curious because it was getting late and he had not returned home. The next thing is, he never returned.
For this next trailer, during the making of this trailer, my goal was to capture the emotions of Anne, describing the moments leading up to the lynching of Rubin. This scene was filmed in Davie, Florida at Wolf Lake Park.
He was a kid.
We don't have that one. Okay. You can back. Okay, you can stay there. From 1882 to 1968, 4,743 lynchings occurred in the U.S. according to records maintained by the NAACP. Florida led the southern states in numbers of lynchings per capita from 1880 to 1940, according to the Equal Justice Initiative. That's the last one. Within our family, there is a silence that has never been addressed. We have experienced trauma, fear, shame, and confusion. For 88 years, my aunt has suppressed the tragedy of losing her Uncle Rubin. For years, as a child, she was told not to talk about it out of fear. Fear that the family would not discuss, fear of what would happen if they discussed it. Shame that this was happening to our family. Confused because we couldn't address the loss of a family member. Anger because there was nothing that we could do about it. Within the African American culture, shameful moments are suppressed. So often it is described as adult talk, or in this instance, it is an incident that you are told, don't mention that. This documentary will bring resolve to many affected by traumatic incidents.
It is almost unbelievable, like it might have been some movie or some novel story, that it didn't really happen, but it did. So after that, they took him to the funeral home and told him to bury him. And that is what the undertaker did, in a small, unmarked cemetery on the northwest side. No headstone, no marker of any kind, so that we would know where he was and could put some kind of identification there. We could even take a group and have prayer. But none of this happened because we did not know where his grave was.
At this time, I would like to pass the microphone to my Aunt Anne, in case she has a few words she would like to share.
Should we turn the lights on?
That's the first time I've ever said
She may want to speak to about it. Okay. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Anne Fleming Naves. and I am the niece of Mr. Rubin Stacy. This is a story that has been repeated in so many families, African American families, over the years. But one never truly believes that it could happen to his or her family. They would never think about that. They know it's happening, but not to them. I have some pictures that will show some of the family members. First of all, we lived in a very small house. We're talking about 1935, Great Depression area. My grandparents, you have those pictures? Yes. My grandparents, Hampton and Nancy Stratford. Those are my grandparents. Hampton and Nancy Stratford lived in the home. My father and mother, Abraham Fleming and Mildred Fleming, and 3 daughters also lived in the house. Along with those, my uncle, the one that you see below, that's my mother, my 2 sisters, and me. And my father's picture's somewhere in there. So that was the second family living in the home. The third family was, of course, my Uncle Rubin Stacy, his wife Willa Mae, and their son, their only son, Willis C. That was the entire family living in a small home, a very close family, one that was always respectable, one that was always working or looking for work or taking care of their families. This was a family tradition. And also in that time, there was a strong, very strong feeling on the parents and grandparents for the grandchildren to become educated, because they realized that being who we were and at the time we were living in, they would need that so much more than the parents who did not have the opportunity. The picture that you see at the bottom, the one on the left is Ann Naves, that's me. The next one is my older sister Ethel Pusey. The one in white is my mother, Mildred Fleming, and the one on the very end is my sister Daisy Williams. We all lived in the home together. Now, my wonderful little cousin Tenille has already told you about how the family men went out to work every day. And I know that's true because I was there and I saw them. I was 8 years old, but I was a smart 8-year-old, and I don't mind saying that now. And it was one of those things where kids in those days were not able to talk back to parents. That was unheard of. To teachers, that was unheard of. Because you were taught in the home that you had to respect authority, beginning with your parents, all elderly people, your teachers, and eventually you would have to deal with the law. You were taught to respect those. And we learned that, not the hard way, but it was an accepted thing at that time. So, living together, and as I said, men going out each day searching for work, we realized, being children, the 3 of us, and the little boy, he was only 3 years old, we realized that something was happening in the family that was very, very different. We realized and we saw each day when the men came home, sometimes they would come home with something, and sometimes they would come home with nothing at all. So that was an accepted thing in the family. But I can say this for my family. We never were extremely hungry. We were never out of doors without a roof over our heads. And because my grandmother was an extremely, extremely wonderfully competent seamstress, she kept us well dressed. My grandmother also, being a very, very woman ahead of her time, a very strong woman, who had in the past, along with her husband, had owned a nice farm in North Florida in a little town called Archer, Florida. But with the Great Depression, they lost the farm, and that is how they ended up coming to Fort Lauderdale, where they had a daughter who had married and had a family, was now living in Fort Lauderdale. So the grandparents joined them. My parents joined them in Fort Lauderdale. So when Uncle didn't come home, as the Tenille said, the house became just absolutely silent. It never occurred to us that my uncle had been murdered. It never occurred to us at that time. We just thought probably he was late coming home, or he'd found a job or something. It didn't happen. So the next morning, we had a word. Someone from the undertakers came by and told us that our uncle, my uncle's body, had been dropped at that place and told, here is another one. We never had an opportunity to give him a church farewell. We never had a chance to even know where he was buried so that we could put a marker there. This is what happened, and I was there. I saw it all. I was a part of it, and I'm still a part of it. It is something that one never completely erases because it's so deeply in your soul. It's in your heart. You can never completely end it. There are some times when it's not quite as bad, and other things are in your life, like you get married, you finish college, you get married, you have your own family, yes. But then there are times when it comes back again. Like a rushing water just comes over you. And then you feel the pain again. I don't know how long you want me to speak here.
As long as you
Okay. We can do that. Just let me say a few minutes about after. His wife and his little boy remained with the family, lived with the family continually for a number of years, until eventually she remarried again.
Attention please. Well, April, please come to our front desk. Thank you.
And she was married for a few years. That marriage didn't work, so she came back with the family, she and her son. Because she had a sister who at the time was living in Chicago and was well established and doing quite well, she decided that she would join her. And that is what she did. She left her little son with us, the family, until she could get established there. Once she became established in Chicago with a job and with an apartment, she wanted someone to bring her son to her because she wanted to have him with her. Luckily, I was the one chosen to take Willie C. to his mother, Willa Mae, in Chicago. And that is where they lived until both of them passed away. His mother passed away in the late 1970s. Willie C. asked to return here to his home in Fort Lauderdale. He had a stroke, and he was in a nursing home. He was extremely unhappy. So my son, Bruce Naves, took a flight to Chicago and brought Willie C. back home here. We placed him in a nursing home here, and he lived almost a year, and then he passed away. That was the end of the Rubin Stacy immediate family. That was the end of them. So, to share this with you today, to let you know that these things should not happen. We all know that. But what we need to do is to do something about not allowing it to happen again. And I say to everyone here, if you ever have this happen to your family, you know exactly what I'm saying. And I hope and pray that it never will happen to anyone's family. I thank you for listening, and I'm so happy to see you here, and I hope you get something. Now, I'll answer some questions. You have something for me.
I have a
Put the
question.
lights on.
Yeah?
There's a home in Fort Lauderdale off of, I believe, Second. And is that home still the same home that y'all lived in?
The whole area has changed. That little home is not there anymore.
Okay,
It was in the 800 block of Northwest 2nd Street,
right.
right? But that whole area has been rebuilt.
The reason I ask that is the McCutcheon family happens to own a home right on Second, and I thought that's who Willie Mae had married into.
No, but Mr. McCutcheon lived in Dania. When she married him, she moved to Dania, Florida.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yes?
When did
I can't hear.
when did his son die? What do you know the year?
When? He's been, do we have that, memorial? It's been about 2 years, close to 2 years, yes.
Thank you.
And one of the last things he said, he had growing up, he didn't talk too much about his father because he never knew it. But in later years, and before he passed away, he said one day, you know, they killed my father. Even before I began to know him, even before I knew him, they killed him. He was an adult and a grown man. And that feeling, that hurt was still there.
So the undertaker that came to your home, you don't know the name of that funeral home? Or?
Oh, yeah, it was the Bento Funeral Home, but I'm not saying it was Mr. Benton. It was probably someone who worked there. But Benton Funeral Home, and that was the only one for African Americans at that time. Yes.
So I've done a little reading on this, and my understanding is that Rubin was born in Thomasville, or in the Thomasville, Georgia area. And I saw something a couple years ago, there was a Gilly family reunion. And from what I could gather from that Rubin's grandmother was a slave, enslaved in Georgia, and that the owner of that property had created, I think, 11 children or something like that with her, and that the Rubin's grandmother would have been one of them. Do you know, like, that lineage part of just his story as it relates to Georgia and when he came down to Broward County?
I'm not aware of that. And his birthplace is in Valdosta, Georgia, as far as information that we've gathered. Yes. But I'm not aware of that. I'm sorry I can't speak to it.
Yeah, I've done a bit of research on it, and you just sort of Google when things follow. I'll be happy to share with you
Yes.
what I found on that. And
That would be great to be able to share with you. Sure. We appreciate that. Anything that will help to produce this. Yeah.
And I have to say, it was Thomasville, Georgia.
Excuse me?
Thomasville, Georgia. He's correct. It was Thomasville, Georgia area.
Well, we'll see, because we have information to.
the thing about Thomasville that's unique is there were two lynchings in a week in Thomasville. Someone who was supposedly a horse thief, who was actually working incarcerated at the time, couldn't have done the crime, was killed in not an unsimilar way to Rubin, and then a man of property, black man, who was also killed that week. And so I didn't know if, you know, if there was a triggering event in the family where it was like, we got to get out of here because it could happen to us too. So that Thomasville part is sort of fascinating. And just how did Rubin end up here, I guess, is a question.
How he ended up here,
Yeah,
I don't know. I really don't.
okay.
I know one thing, that he and my aunt were married in Georgia, and then they returned here together, okay? And they had this small son. That is what I know.
Lily was born in Georgia?
Who?
The son was born in Georgia, or?
Yes,
Okay.
son was born in Georgia. Yes.
I don't know where Stacy was born, but Thomasville in South Austin is in the general area. I was born in Brooks County, which is outside of Thomasville, and that was 1949.
Yeah. Right, southern Georgia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes?
First of all, thank you, Ms. Ann, for coming and sharing and telling the story. Tenille as well, thank you both. I just said thank you for coming and being able to tell the story today, and Tenille as well, for being able to share. I think my question is for both of you. Ms. Ann, at the end, you're talking about, you know, I want people to make sure and take away that feeling about not wanting this to happen to anybody else's family, right?
Right.
And for both of you, I'm interested in hearing, like, what is you don't want this to happen to other people's family. We live in a state right now where we can't tell people don't want us to tell our secrets. Right. And so I'm being clear about what message we want people who are assembled here to walk away with. And as we begin to think about what it means to tell the stories of our history, sometimes that people don't want us to tell, what do you want people to walk away with?
The first thing, and I know that this is something that she's passionate about because we talk about it also, the first thing that I would want people to do is educate your children, talk to your children, speak to your children. Let's do away with keeping things a secret and telling them, I don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about it. Let's teach our children history, teach them their history, teach them about their families, teach them about their culture so that they have a firm understanding on what's happening around them, as opposed to leaving it in the hands of the schools because of everything that is happening right now. I believe that's the first place to start.
Thank you.
And also, I would like to add to that, we know what is going on now in education, right? I think everyone in here is aware of that now. Banning books and changing curriculum. We want children, all children, to know the truth of history. How do you just step in and change history? It happened. It was there. What we want is for all children to know the truth about this great country. Why is it some people want to exclude only the contributions of African Americans and not all the other ethnic groups that are here, that have come here? And most of all, the Native Americans, okay? They were first. They were first. So if we could all do that, parents in our homes, and we have to speak up to our schools also, to our, not only to our school board, but we need to meet with and speak with the schools that our children attend. Do we want them to grow up not knowing what this country was and what it is now? Or do we want them to know the truth? What is there so bad about the truth? If it happened and it's there, how can you deny it?
Right. I
would say to all of you, speak up and stand up for the history of this country so that all children can grow up knowing about it, understanding it, and doing whatever they can get future generation to make it better. To make it better for all.
I would like to say something. This is my aunt, so you understand that I came from a great lineage. This is the picture of the lady on the right. That was my mother. She's passed away last year. So I come from this rich culture. These are my people right here. This is my family. Tenille is my darling cousin. That's her mother. So we come from a rich culture. I have to say I admire Jewish people because they never let you forget. No one's questioning that. I just have to say this. I'm not angry, but it just needs to be said. If we don't, how can you change what you don't acknowledge? How can you change what you don't acknowledge? So if you erase something, how are you going to make it better?
Yes.
How do you just tell me and my children and my cousins and this baby sitting here, she doesn't have the actual history. I heard that on the news the other day. We're going to teach actual history. Actual history sometimes is ugly, it's dirty, it's messy, it's beautiful, it's encompassing, it's all enriching, and you take that and you make it better. But tell me how you do that if you can't even acknowledge it. If you erase it and throw it under the rug. How do you do that? That's very hurtful to me as an African American woman in this country to be told my history is not actual, it's not real, and it should be non-offensive to your beautiful children and your grandchildren. It should be. It should make them feel something. Like, I don't want that to ever happen. Not to you, not to me, not to them, not to Native American, not to African American, not to Chinese, not to Asian, not to South American. It should happen to no one.
Yes.
You can't get there when you sweep it under the rug. You can't get there not to acknowledge it. So just think about this when you go home.
Yes.
How do you change to make it better if you can't even acknowledge it?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda. Please, take it on with you.
I just have a personal story to tell about this story. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. My father actually grew up in Melrose Park, which is right near this spot. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. I went to kindergarten right next to this spot. It's 35th Avenue and Davie Boulevard. There's a Publix there now. My father told me this story because he had heard it when he moved to this country in 1953 from England. So they were still talking about it 18 years later in that community because it wasn't that long. My grandmother was from England, and when she got to this country and she saw a black woman that was pregnant trying to go in the grocery store, my grandmother opened the door for her. She told me this story, and she said the woman would not go in. And she's looking at her like, go on. And the woman said no. And my grandmother was like, what's wrong? You know, she was not prepared for what she saw when she came here. Another part of this story that I kind of have a connection to is since we grew up in Fort Lauderdale, we knew a lot of pioneer families. And there was a family named the Annapus, and University Drive used to be called Annapu Road because that's where they lived. They changed it to University Drive when they started building all the universities there. And they asked their permission, they said fine. But when this gentleman was a child, his best friend said, I want to show you something. And they got on their bicycles from Davie and pedaled all the way to this spot. And when my father's friend, who was a child at the time, saw what his friend wanted to show him, he beat the living daylights out of the kid. He said, why in the world would you bring, it's not an emergency, why would you bring me to see something like this? He was outraged. So there were people that were outraged back then that weren't black, but we just don't know about their story either because nobody talked about it. You know, it was like this fear, this like climate of fear that everybody just shut up, even if you had another point of view. But I was so happy to hear that story and that I knew somebody that was outraged back then. Because I think almost everybody's outraged now. And he was a pioneer for doing what he did at a young age. He knew that. So I just wanted to share that with everybody today.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Yes.
I just want to say thank you to your family. I just want to say thank you to your family for having the courage, the strength to speak about this story. My name is Brittany, and I've lived in Broward County for all my life, in the same home in Park Pines. I'm a community liaison, and I've been coming to this library for the past couple months. And I just want to say thank you to the Sterling branch for hosting an event like this. incredibly important for us to be having these discussions.
Yes.
As if we don't have these conversations about history, we allow for it to happen again. There was just a yoga in the park with Wolf Lake Creek yesterday. I live across from the park. I took my niece there a couple months ago and walked, and I felt so much heaviness not knowing the history that exists in that park. And I think it's just so important because if we don't have these conversations, they're gonna be erased, right? I come from a Caribbean diaspora, a Haitian family, so it's not necessarily within our history, but we have history of our own, right? As we all know, as we should know about the Haitian history. But there's so much within Broward County that needs to be shared, that needs to be talked about in schools and passed on. And it's so beautiful to have you here. My grandmother is also just turned 97. It's a blessing.
Yes.
A blessing to have you and to have you share your knowledge. And the fact that you can recall this from 8 years old.
Yes.
Yes.
So many times we're told that kids don't have recollection of what happened. And it's traumatic and it stays for lifelong. So thank you. Thank you for this.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I want to say thank you to you also. And as a Broward County Trailblazer, because I didn't hear that mentioned in here. So many of you don't know that Ann Naves is a Broward County Trailblazer, and so am I. And we have been working on the Rubin Stacy story. So this is her story, and this is her day. And we are going to collaborate this information, and it's going to be out there, and all the families will come together. So I just want to thank you for sharing Willie C's picture, because this is the first time that I have seen it, doing all of my research of Rubin Stacy. So thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
One last question. When I first started, I met both of you. The first thing that came out is, when did you decide to begin talking about Rubin Stacy and the lynching? Because I think people in this room would be surprised that it wasn't that long.
You want to tell it? What I did. Okay. What I did was, I had a few kids. I'm a mom of 4. And they started asking questions, and they were asking questions that I could not answer. And so I started talking to my mom, and I said, you know what I should do? Maybe I should call up Ann and record her. I can do, because I'm always thinking of things that I can do documentaries on, but I want to make sure that it's something that will stick. And because the kids, and by the way, stand up and speak. Sometimes I have a low tone, so I apologize.
Yes.
Because my kids ask so many questions, and the type of work that I do, they are my right and left hand. So whenever I need help, from the 8-year-old here in the room, all the way to the oldest, which is 23, I ask them for their help. So I said, this is what we'll do. We'll go and meet with Ann, we'll meet with cousin Linda at the time, because I have footage of her talking about education. I wanted to do a special on education and the education within our family, because we have a large number of teachers within our family. And I called up Ann, and my mom was like, I just want you to be prepared, because she may say no. This is something she does not talk about. I've asked in the past, and she said no. And I think I was sick, and my mom said, Ann called, she's looking for you. And I said, you know what, I said I was gonna call her. As soon as I feel better, I'll call. And she ended, I think either she called or I called, but I stopped her mid-conversation. I said, listen, I want to talk about what happened to Rubin Stacy. And she said, of course I will. I said, you will? I said, everyone says that you will not talk about it.
When did this happen?
It's like a year ago.
Within the last year.
Within the last year.
Yeah, I think that's what people would find.
It was in the paper.
Yeah, it was within the last year. She agreed to it, and I said, would you allow me to record you? And she said, of course, you can record me. And I immediately jumped on it because there's so much history in it, and there's so many things that we could learn from it. There's so many questions that my children had that they, not only will you stand here and record it,
but you will also listen and learn and understand and talk about it. Which brings me to the fact that when they did the street naming, my oldest son is a graduate of St. Thomas Aquinas, and he was trying to figure out, why would it be there? Why are we going here for a street name? And I said, this is just a marker. This is just a place where we're doing the street name. And he said, well, but explain to me exactly what happened. I truly need to know what happened, because if this is happening here around us, this is our family, and I know nothing about it. And this is the way that we started to dig into it. And we also took her out recently. I took her out with the boys, and they started to ask questions, but they were not asking the right questions. And I said, I want you to think about what you're asking her, because she has all the answers. And the youngest one asked her, what did he ask you? We were at the park.
I forgot, but he said something about school and
I think it had to do with
school.
It had to do with school. He's being taught history in school currently, but he was not taught about what happened to Rubin Stacy. So I told him, I said, you're speaking to the source, so ask her. And so he said, okay, so every chance he gets, that's why, this is the reason that I keep telling everyone, talk to your family, speak to your children, even the things that we deem as family secrets, let's not have family secrets. Let's talk to our children, be open to them about their cultures, especially if there's mixed cultures. Talk to your children. I have been speaking with Richard, who I love dearly, and Jim, thank you so much, on ideas that I have in education. Since we're not sure about what will happen within the education system in terms of teaching our children. So it is my plan to implement a little bit more innovation when it comes to learning. I'm sure at some point we'll talk about that later. But I'm excited that we were even able to come here today. I'm happy that my daughter, the youngest one who's not paying attention right now, that she's here to witness all of this, because it's important. And I'm glad that my mom is here, because my mom says to me a lot, because I speak at a low tone, speak up. So this is me speaking up. So thank you everyone for coming out.
I'm Ramona LaRoche, and I really need to share. I want to thank you, Tenille, and Ms. Ann, thank you so much. I'm a sixth-generation Gullah Geechee woman. My grandfather was murdered in 1937. So he was not lynched, but he was shot by a neighbor. And it was the beginning of gentrification in Georgetown, South Carolina. We're talking about lynchings today, but we have to realize that lynchings come in so many forms against atrocities against people all over the United States, all over the world. And all of it is connected to mental health. America, we don't want to talk about mental health. We don't want to go get counseling. We don't want to, it's like our families don't want to talk about the secrets. When I asked as a child what happened, we were told it was a hunting accident. But later on, because I'm the family genealogist, I was the one that found the records in the courthouse that was in the basement. Or the one page with 3 sentences of the inquest that they had that year. So I just want to share how important mental health is. The other thing, the importance, everybody that's in this room, where's the young people that you brought with you? I'm so happy that Tenille has a family. Well, we have to make a commitment as elders, and I'm an elder, I'm a young elder. We have to make a commitment to bring young people with us to these conversations. It's not enough to just come listen and see if it's safe and then take it home. You have to make the commitment, because all of our organizations throughout the United States are dying. We don't have enough members. We don't know as elders how to pass the baton on, because we want to maintain control in our adultism. It's important to do intergenerational work around this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sure. Okay, one more question.
What convinced you in the last year to come forward and do this? Why were you reluctant before?
Well, it's that it wasn't really hidden all the years, and those along with me, my sisters and all, occasionally we would talk about it. but it never came out speaking to the entire family or to the next generation. Because remember now, during those times, children did not really speak up. It was the old saying, you're seen and not heard. I'm sure some of you have heard that. Well, that was one reason why we didn't speak up more to our next generation, because we were carrying some of the same things with us. But the whole thing is, I just want to close by saying what the family really wants, and I think Neil will agree and our family members will agree, we want justice. We want justice because our relative never had an opportunity to stand before a judge, never a jury trial. He was just simply killed and just thrown down like some animal. We want justice. We want also to establish a nonprofit organization so that our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren can have scholarships to attend college. This is what the family wants. The family also would like to have help for a very senior citizen. I might be the most senior one. Well, at 96, what do you think? But anyway, that's what the family would like to have. A nonprofit organization so that scholarships can be furnished for our children, future generations, and help for the senior citizens who really need it, maybe in the form of housing or whatever. But the family, we feel as a whole, deserves these things. And again, I want to thank everyone for being here today. This is an extraordinary day for us, and the family joins me. And Tenille, you can say a last word in saying that we certainly appreciate you being here.
Once again, thank you to the Sterling Library. Certainly thank you to Richard. Thank you to Jim and seeing the story, within the story. Thank you so much. I can't say, I tell him a lot. Thank you a million times. And thank you so much, Michael. Michael he does so much of the editing, so many things that I don't know. He's also a historian. He's a historian. Everything I don't know, I can call and be like, what does this mean? Can you help me understand this? Or can you help me with slides? So he's very instrumental in helping out with everything that was presented here today. So I just want to thank everyone for coming out.